This week on the Old School RuneScape Update, combat and crew for sailing arrive in the beta with questions around purpose and fun. Random events and general improvements were also added that give life to the seas. Also, the first batch of Summer Sweep Up combat changes. This is the Old School RuneScape Update, episode 78, recorded Saturday, June 28th, 2025. One step forward, two steps back. Hello everybody and welcome back to the Old School RuneScape Update. Sirion and myself are here, and sailing is back. Sailing is back with a beta for crew, combat, random events, and just some general fixes since last time, so we're going to go through all that. But, of course, you having a fun time on the high seas?
Sure.
I think that's a good way of putting it. Sure, that's a good way of putting it. But we'll also, of course, touch on the summer sweep-up changes for combat that came in this week, though not too much on those since we went over them in bulk when they arrived, when they were announced. But of course, if you want to follow along, full show notes can be found over at update.show/os, and I'll mention we have a community Discord over at update.show/discord, and the friends chat can be found in game at BitsBytes. All right, sailing, crew, combat, and random events.
Yeah, not terribly surprising. We knew that these were sort of the major features that were missing, so it was sort of a matter of time until we got a beta. I thought that it was pretty short notice. I would have expected us to see like a devlog and maybe have like a round of like community feedback. Like I think a lot of people judged sailing before playing it, and then when playing it actually changed their mind. And I think that's always the case. You sort of need to play it to get a good sense of it. But also I think you can still talk about, what roles should crew play? Like where should crew actually be used? Like what are the things that make sense for you? How do you expect combat to work? And I feel we had none of that consultation. It feels like
pretty baked already.
Yeah, exactly. That surprises me, especially if you look at how much, to get the core mechanics right, we got sort of the back and forth, how much devlogs we got, and now combat and crew is here. It surprised me a little bit, to be honest.
Yeah, it's just put on. It almost feels as though it's just, there. And what we want to do with this is trying to ask a question from the information we have to start off with is, what purpose does crew serve? And in the beta, you can get some basic crew members by just pressing a button, but I don't think they said over time where you're going to get crew members when this arrives live.
Oh, you've not really been paying attention to the news posts. You need to find them in the game world and talk to them.
Okay. Is that really all there is?
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Fair enough.
That being said, it's reward space, right? Like, maybe not a great example, but imagine if, like, my arm, after helping him with his quest, he becomes, like, a crew member, right? Like, that's the kind of things I can see happening. Like, it's a reward space for quests or mini quests, and that makes it interesting to me.
Yeah, that's fair. And
especially if like normal crew you get is sort of average, but the sort of special crew has maybe like special abilities or really high stats. Similar to how in RS3 for archaeology, the assistance you get, like if you finish like an entire dig site, you get like a really good assistant with special powers.
Yeah. So I guess the question is with that, what exactly should crew be for in this? And we look at this and you can assign them to various jobs on your boat, and I guess the thing that we're asking here with this is that in ideal world, what purpose is crew serving on this ship right now? And I think if I was to say what it feels like to me, it's to take a load off from you, the player, to abstract some of those boat features away.
Yeah, that does seem what it does, right? Like if you put somebody on the helm, then all of a sudden you can just click and the boat goes without having to be at the helm, which that surprises me, to be honest, because I remember earlier discussions where people asked for that exact feature and they were like, no, we can't do that because it's complicated for like figuring out if you click on the ship to move around or clicking around. So not entirely sure what changed there, but yeah, having like somebody sit on one of your facilities or on the helm trivializes that mechanic. And I at some point had like 2 crew, one on the cannon, one on the helm, and I was not doing anything. Like I had sort of automated the entire skill away, and it got very boring very quickly. And that is, I do think that is sort of what players will do, and that you as a designer would need to watch out for, is that if you let players do it, they will optimize the fun out of a game, and we see that in RuneScape all aboard, right?
Yeah,
I don't know.
And the question is, will the benefits to you firing the cannon or you manning the helm, will that be high enough that you just don't assign somebody to do it? Or, and I think a more interesting question to ask the devs would be, is the idea of assigning a crew member with a high, helmsmanship skill, is that the ultimate end goal of sailing to the point where you can just, assign them and then you just click around and your boat effectively drives itself? That's an interesting.
I
thought,
think that is unfortunate, because I think that undermines that's the thing. By the moment I had assigned crew to all of the interesting facilities on my ship, basically everything that made sailing interesting and fun had disappeared. Like, one thing that the sailing alpha did really well is that it showed that traversal in the ship was actually, was sort of tedious, and we'll get back to that in a second, because they did some things to address that. It was sort of tedious, but it was also sort of fun, right? Like, click on the stills, and like, especially on the Barracuda trials, sort of like learn how to navigate very well, and try and figure out if you can fit between like certain rocks and islands, and getting good at navigation was all sort of there, and I mean, it still sort of is, I guess, to be honest, to an extent, because you're still steering the ship. But
yeah, you're still clicking.
I don't know. It all of a sudden feels so different that you're just sitting there sort of controlling the ship. Like, one of the things they said they wanted to avoid is that the player is the ship, right? That was one of the design philosophies, but by assigning NPCs to all of the facilities and automating it, I think they've gone backwards on that.
Yeah, I was going to say, it almost feels as though that has kind of been, waved away with this.
Yeah, exactly. So, I don't know. I ended up just, I mean, combat is its whole different beast, and we will talk about that in a moment. But in combat, I ended up just doing the cannon myself, because you have to sort of get out of your facility anyway to haul in your booty, I guess. I don't know. I don't know why crew members are a thing. I don't know what problem they're solving, and that, I think, like,
And to be fair, you say that because it all culminates in that idea of you becoming the boat and optimizing the fun out of what you had with sailing in the alpha. That's why you say that, right?
Yeah. like normally if you design like a game, you would sort of expand on the game mechanics. Because my expectation is that crew members are mostly there to add depth, right? And maybe to get rid of some of the tedium, but I have my doubts on whether that's a good good goal to begin with. I should stop waffling so much because I keep losing my train of thought.
Well, no, and one thing that you gave me an idea of with that, when you were mentioning, maybe, having a bit more depth for the crew, they have stats to it like privateering and helmsmanship as an example. And maybe, and I don't necessarily know right now what the interaction is between all these if you don't assign that crew member to do anything on those haunt spots, but maybe what something that could be considered for this is if the crew members were just stat buffs as well for your boat, with secondarily being the option to man that facility.
Yeah, but that's not how they work right now. Do I think
no, that's not how they work right now. They could work,
and maybe that would be more interesting, and that would be just another. Though then it would overlap a lot with ship upgrades, and what's the difference at that point? Like, so many game design sort of principles go through my head, right? Like what I just said, that if the crew is just a stat buff, then it's the same as upgrading your hull, and there should really, ideally, not be two different mechanics that end up having the same thing, because then there's no reason for them to be two separate things. But also, I feel that crew is a thing in sailing purely because it was part of the original pitch, not because the skill called for it or needed it.
Right, because if you're going to go sailing, what fun is going sailing? And I use the term fun rather loosely. What fun is going sailing if you don't have a crew on that boat?
I mean, more fun than the crew doing everything.
Well, that's how it turned out. But I mean, you're not going to go on hit the seas yourself in a boat without crew members in the real world.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Look, and maybe this is a limitation of the beta, and once you have like a big ship with maybe multiple cannons that can be fired at the same time, all of a sudden maybe there's some value and it's interesting. But even then, the whole thing felt a little bit clunky, and you're dealing with NPCs who will do their best but might not be the most predictable at times. It's the same as escorting like an NPC in any quest, right? It's usually fine, but sometimes they go off and do something that you don't want. All in all, to me, this comes back to what we started the show with, which is I don't think there was ever the conversation with the community, what do you actually expect crew to do on your ship? What is crew actually needed for? And I don't know if the discussion was had among the developers themselves, if they had a discussion of, what do we actually want crew to add to the skill? And right now, it just, and this is like to the credit of the alpha, right? But compared to the alpha, the crew mechanics feel rough.
Yeah,
the combat mechanics feel rough.
I'll agree with that. Is that I feel like my opinion of the skill went up with the alpha in the first play test. It at this point is flat or is angling slightly downward.
I mean, this is sort of maybe getting ahead of ourselves, but like if I were to describe this beta, it's one step forward, two steps back.
No, I think you're right, and we'll see where we land with combat on that. And is there time? Is there time to fundamentally work other stuff in with crew to improve crew from here? Because I'm going to say this here. Everything we got here, systems wise, feels pretty much close to done. And I think what the skill needs before launch is obviously the content and the polish.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like that's the state it's at right now.
Sure, yeah. Except for I feel both crew and combat are like I said, rough.
Yeah. So what would you like to see crew be? Because I mean, I gave my idea of a stat lever to pull, but beyond that, like I wasn't the biggest sailing fan, so I'm not coming in here and saying this is how my crew should work.
Yeah, I don't know honestly, and I would love to get some insight in what the designers themselves thought crew was going to add and do. I feel that that's not really well explained. It's more like there's crew now, we made it work, and that's really what it is. Like they made crew work. I don't think it is in its current state and with the current content a significant value addition to the skill.
Right, because you can do everything on the boat yourself and in many cases have more fun with it. It might get a little tedious when bouncing back and forth between the helm and the cannon.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Though I do have to say, now that I got to play it again, like I've gotten used to having to click the helm before moving. Like I actually did not make that mistake very often.
The movement feels intuitive.
But then with the combat, it actually started feeling worse again because you have to like click the cannon and then shoot and then haul in the loot and all of this.
Yeah, well let's move on to combat unless you have anything else on crew.
I mean, there's one small, tiny nitpick that I mean, it's a small thing, but I'm going to mention it, is I found it a bit immersion breaking that every ship that came past had exactly the same crew on board.
But that'll change.
I mean, hopefully that will change, especially as there's like more people, more crew. Maybe there will be enough horizontal space that people will choose differently.
Could you imagine recruiting one of the Tazar people as a crew member?
Oh, that would be funny.
I know.
I hope it doesn't become a point of just like Graceful was, right? Where everybody wears Graceful. I hope it doesn't become a point of every player will be going around with the same crew and the same ship design. I hope that there's enough, like either just cosmetic visualization, cosmetic customization would already add a lot, I think, but ideally there's really more than one build that's valid. And I do hope that
that's a good point.
There will be enough sort of it will make sense to have like separate ships for like a fishing ship and like an exploration ship. Like I hope that the differences are going to be big enough
imagine building out yourself a ship that's built around speed and a little bit of durability for the Barracuda trials.
Mm-hmm.
Something like that. So,
mm-hmm.
All right. Well, that's crew and combat. We started exactly the same spot with this. What exactly does the combat system do on the boat? And I have to say, I have some maybe weird fantasies about this. I learned in the beta that you can use your ship to attack land-based creatures, so that's one interesting thing. But I obviously what we used it for in the beta was just hosing down sharks and then harvesting them in. But I just have to point this out. You can sail to North of the Wilderness. What if there's a world on launch, and I don't necessarily know what the interactions of this will be? What if there's a case on launch where the boats can sail to the north of the wilderness and attack people in the wilderness?
That would be an interesting bug.
That would be funny.
Yeah. I don't know if like the Wilderness Sea is going to be PvP to begin with. I doubt it, with like Fossil Island and all the other stuff being on the same
Yeah, I
so
don't
that's gonna
anticipate
really.
that they'd, make PvP waters, but just the idea you can get, close to the PvP action. Can the wilderness people attack the boat and the people on
No,
the boat, so on and so forth?
I doubt it. It will probably work exactly the same as people standing in and outside of like the actual wilderness.
Yeah, like outside of Edgeville versus over the ditch and whatnot.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
but that aside, at this point in time, you know, again we asked the same question: what is the purpose of combat here? And like maybe go and kill some shark and bring them in. I guess right now.
My take is that the skill could work without combat, and I would even like with the state it is in right now, I would even argue that they should drop combat from launch scope for sailing and bring it in at a later point.
You're not wrong about that, because initially, upon playing with the boat, there's a couple of things that stand out to me. One, it's not immediately clear what the arc is of a specific cannon, and you can assign one of your crew members to work the cannon, and then when you rotate your boat, they'll automatically start firing after you click a target. And the other thing is what is the range of these cannonballs? That's a question that's
so far it seems pretty lenient. Like I have not really had.
I think the arc is the bigger issue, honestly, over the range. But
I found the arc is really quite lenient. I've never really had the issue with that. It's the range that I don't know yet, but it's not like you can see your range for like a crossbow either in the game. So
yeah, and maybe that's just something you fix with the tooltip on the cannon.
But anything on anything on the right side of the ship, I did usually not have a big problem hitting.
Yeah. So effectively, you build a cannon, and then you put the cannonballs either in your inventory or in your chest on your boat, and then it just automatically takes the cannonballs from there and launches them at whatever you fire at. And you and I did some group beta testing here, and your sense was
some group BVM, right?
Yeah, boat
BVM?
versus monster. Good.
Yeah, exactly.
I like that.
Yeah.
You just press a thing and it goes. And you said it best. I don't know if you want me to say it or you want to say it again.
I don't exactly what my word choice was.
You said it's more boring than actual combat in the mainland because there's no gear swapping, there's no movement, there's no prayers. You just sit and wait.
And again, this shows how spoiled we have become with how interesting and challenging combat can be, like actual PVM encounters. Like if you look back at the oldest bosses of old school that are still in the game, that is also like you click and you eat and that's it, right? Sure, but we've gotten so far that the combat on the sailing combat felt like a massive step backwards compared to what we have. And I don't know if we will get prayers for boats. That would be hilarious.
Let's be honest, that would be the ultimate in terms of feature creep, and probably not something that would be advisable.
But we'll also not really get like gear swaps, like equip swapping. We won't be getting that.
No, because you built the cannon on a hotspot.
Yeah. So we won't have prayers. Sure, we'll have eating and maybe movement. Though movement right now works well for navigation, like between places, but on like a small scale, it's really just frustrating having to deal with the arc, especially Yeah, like even if we were to get boat versus boat combat in the future, I don't know. Like having played games like Assassin's Creed where you need to deal with sort of ship maneuvering to get it in there, that's never really been my favorite part. And I don't know if they can make that work as an interesting mechanic in the confines of old school RuneScape. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
So
Because, I mean, if you, like, let's be honest. If you're going to want boat versus boat combat, unless they really put an interesting old school spin on it, you're better off, I think, playing something else that's, specifically designed for that.
Exactly. So I do feel that the combat lacks depth. That doesn't mean that the combat doesn't have potential, right? I think you could make something very interesting work, but you need to design it really well with its own set of mechanics and its own set of depth. And it's almost, I mean, I don't want to say a whole skill in itself, but it's definitely a whole massive new system in itself. And I don't know. And this sort of sums up how I feel about crew and combat. It feels like what we got is a minimum viable product that isn't horrible. Like on a technical level, it works quite well, and it ticks the boxes. We have crew and combat now, but I don't think it is a.
It's there to be there.
Exactly. I don't think the skill has gotten better through it.
Okay, and see, I felt the same way coming in, and I was worried that was just going to be a me situation because of how I feel about combat in the game in general. But the fact that you're saying something similar, I think speaks volumes on this.
Yeah, and look,
and the thing
I
is,
could come up with all kinds of reasons. Like, oh yeah, it's only early game.
No,
like if you look at early game combat is also click a crab and wait until you level up, right? Sure, I get that, but without more information, it's also really hard to make a fair judgment on this. And based on what I've seen,
right, and that goes back to the sense that I said, is that it feels like system-wise it's near being complete, and we're heading down the polish and content path now. And because of that, I wonder how much wiggle room there is to improve things like combat and crew, not from just smoothing out the rough edges, but questioning and putting in an actual purpose for them. Because you put a cannon on your boat and you assign somebody to it, and then you man the helm, and then you can just mark a target, and then the cannon goes boom, 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 kills it, and you're done. And that's really all there is.
Yeah, but then you need to stop steering the boat to haul in.
Yeah, to go.
Yeah, so it like.
And then we're to the point where you might as well have a helmsman manning the helm, so you could just do that.
Yeah.
And then we're back to. Yeah. What we talked about with crew.
Yeah. And look, if the combat is meant to be a lightweight thing, just like fishing, it's just meant to be like one of the many things you can do with your ship, then maybe the current system is fine. But talking in the context of, naval bosses and like big PVM encounters on the ocean, I just don't know how this system will evolve to support that.
Now, I mean, if Jagex gives us the RuneScape version of World of Warships, that would be an interesting idea for combat. But I don't think that's within the scope of what sailing is. So, we're kind of damned if we do, damned if we don't in this situation, because it's going to come with the skill regardless of that. And, I feel like I'm in a similar boat as you were with crew, is that I don't... Not intended. In that I don't necessarily know what would make combat better in the ideal implementation?
Like, I think combat is another thing where, they did this whole thing about sailing, right? Like, what do you want sailing to be? What do you expect it to give you, right? Like, how does it integrate in the game? What does it make you feel, right? Combat needs to go to that same level of research and development, in a sense. And that, yeah, that feels lacking for both crew and combat right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
It feels like we skipped a few steps in identifying what they should be for the game, I think.
Yeah, and you and I even tested this from our own perspective of being on the same boat together.
Yep.
And maybe that was fun for a little bit, but I don't necessarily know that that's something we do.
I mean, I'm glad it works, right? And I could see, if, like, let's say we do flesh up, like we do spruce up combat and it becomes like a reasonably fun thing to do, right? We notice that charting works fine, even from the ship that you're not owning yourself. What if you can do co-op Slayer tasks from a ship? Because Slayer tasks are, or what if you can do tasks, sort of co-op tasks? I guess they're tasks, right?
Called tasks. Bounty tasks.
Co-op bounty, like things like that, I think are always a good thing because we probably need more of that in the game.
More social gameplay.
After all. Exactly. So I am glad that it works. I'm glad they made it work. I do hope they lean into that a little bit. Like, all credit where credit is due.
Yeah, absolutely. With that, I think we can move on to the random events, unless you have anything else combat-oriented.
No.
Okay.
I wish I could like it more. I really do.
And I wish I could see the random events. I had no idea that catching wind was a random event. I just thought that was something that periodically happened with the skill.
Well, it does, right? Both. You do get your sills that you catch wind and trim. That's on a timer.
Right.
But there is also a strong breeze of wind where that mechanic just happens a few times in a row, like constantly.
Yeah, and I noticed after the first time that you can actually see it on the water in terms of a little white swirly thing.
Yeah, exactly.
So that was neat and engaging there for that one. The other one that I saw was retrieving lost goods, which are just crates from in the ocean that you can pick up. And again, everything I'm assuming that we get from this in the beta here is placeholder, because I got one piece of leather, which would be, a major letdown in game. So I'm assuming that's the placeholder there for that. What is the underwater glow? I did not see that one.
Oh, it's basically, you see like an orange dot and you need to sail over it, and then the dot moves and you need to sort of trace it, and it like moves like 3 or 4 times, and then afterwards, I don't know if it gets you anything right now. Maybe a bit of XP. My XP drops are broken in the beta, so I couldn't see my XP drops. But yeah, which is almost exactly what I like, the idea I shared on last show, right? Where Adair was talking about like barrels where you can find, like, you can jump over to get some money or things like that. And that's basically exactly what they implemented. And all in all, between these random events and adding NPC ships, which I don't know if they mentioned anywhere that they added NPC ships, but they did add NPC ships.
The charter boats just cruising around.
Exactly, which I think is absolutely lovely. It, to me, solved the biggest problem of the alpha, which is that the sea felt too empty. I still hope we're going to see
that's
more
a good
landmarks.
Point. That was something that did come up.
Yeah. I hope we still get we get more landmarks and more like maybe like interesting like coral or other like water features that aren't just big blue or slightly different tints of blue, which looks a little bit unnatural on the map right now, but massive improvement.
Yeah.
Big fan.
They also say that are more planned for the full release, and they want to keep them as a surprise. So with that, they want ideas for what future random events at sea could look like with that.
Yeah, I would love if like random events aren't necessarily don't necessarily need to be interacted with. So one of the things, like I think again, the Wind Waker, which is a game where like half the game is sailing on water, so that is a really good example. Sometimes when you're sailing, there's just a bunch of birds that flock around you and like fly along. Like things like that would be cool as well, I think.
Yeah, and I think if you look at some of the less obnoxious surface world random events like the genie and Count Check and whatnot, I think if you had some sort of maybe equivalent of those where you cruise up against an NPC boat or something to that effect, and they say hello, or you interact with them, and maybe you get some sort of 30-second to a minute passive buff for your boat. Maybe something like that might be interesting. Just have those same sort of creatures around, like the genie and Count Check. Obviously, not the exact same ones, but just something passive.
Obviously, what I want to run into is KGP submarines.
Ooh, that'd be neat.
I think that would be a fun like throwback kind of reference. A ghost ship might be interesting as well.
Okay, that's neat. You got me wanting to play World of Warships again. Since there's actually real combat there. Like, I'm not a fan. I wasn't a fan of that game. I tried it, and it was so slow it put me to sleep. But now that we're talking ship-to-ship combat, maybe I need to give it another look.
Yeah.
Just to get that same sort of thing. And it's underscoring here that I think if you loop into what makes any game called RuneScape successful, and you do that for sailing, you'll have a successful skill. But at the same time, if you go down these paths of creating systems that don't necessarily make sense or abstract the fun of RuneScape away, maybe that's not the way to go. Because you'll know that our entire discussion here on random events is focused on adding character to the seas, adding character to the boat, and what does the game thrive on the surface world? It's that exact same character.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that's rather striking from that perspective.
Yeah. Yeah.
They also have a list of things that they improved entirely from the alpha here. And this is what you were talking about, the QOL features and unlocks to alleviate tedium via crew member and random sea event systems. Mobile. Neither of us tried it on mobile because I don't think we wanted to do that for the full sailing experience given where we were at.
Yeah.
Yeah. Updated ocean labels. For charting, they removed the anti-rust tonic item and gameplay interaction to streamline that. That was good.
Oh, can we streamline finding the center of the wind field as well, please?
Yeah, that would be good.
It's a fun idea, but it was that I'm calling it now. There's gonna be a RuneLite plugin that just tells me where to go.
That's an interesting idea. No, that's an interesting idea. Because
Quest Helper is gonna support the charting goals, right?
Yeah. Because what if a lot of our concerns we had in the previous 2 segments was fixed by RuneLite?
I don't think so. I think the combat and crew changes are fundamental.
All right, fair enough. And then a whole bunch of things in related to changing the map labels and whatnot to make them more understandable and more in line with what players would expect, and other things as well, including fixing bugs where you might appear under other players' boats, and of course fixing the bug that we've always seen in game, that imps could walk on water.
Yeah, I think what I really like, just moving on and talking to sort of the full release, so things that they have identified from the alpha but haven't gotten around to fixing yet. To me, one of the highlights was getting like rapids that you unlock from charting an entire region. Love that idea, right? It to me, it's a very thematic reward of, hey, if you chart like an
Basically
entire
like
region,
a sea highway.
you unlock like a, yeah, exactly. Love it, right? Like, to me, that is a really thematic reward, and it solves the problem of, if I just want to go from A to B, I want to just go there fast. And maybe I could just click the rapid and it will get me from A to B after just not getting any XP. Really good way of addressing quick travel, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
That really stood out to me.
Yeah.
The other thing that stood out to me, at least, was the XP distribution between salvaging and sorting, because right now there is really no point to sorting the salvage unless the reward space becomes really good, but you also want to avoid that becoming too powerful. They also don't want to give too much XP for sorting the salvage, because salvage is tradable.
Right, you don't necessarily want it to become a full buyable skill, and at the same time, you don't necessarily want to, just have people drop the salvage on their boat and remain at that spot. So it's about building.
Do you think salvage should be tradable to begin with? Like, I'm not sure why salvage should be tradable. I
don't think so. I am, very much a fan when it comes to skills, of having, the skills have their own unique and tight ecosystems, and I don't think that sailing XP should be buyable in massive quantities from people.
No, but like, let's say that sorting does not maybe give some token XP, so it's really not realistic to use that for training and solve it that way.
I mean,
like, should salvage be like taking away the XP question, right? And just looking at the items and the actual GP per hour. Should salvage be tradable? It's a little bit like, I don't know, should grimy herbs be tradable, I guess.
And I mean, right? from that perspective, because we've had it, since the beginning on that, the answer is yes. But I don't necessarily, know if that's needed here.
Because making salvage untradable would solve this problem entirely.
It would.
Though it also means that, just getting a bunch of salvage is not going to get you anything. Though at that point, what might be interesting is if just salvaging and dropping the salvage gives you a certain amount of might give you higher XP per hour, but then also sorting it allows you to get a bunch of GP per hour, even though it's maybe slightly slower XP per hour. So it creates some interesting choice.
Yeah, it does. And I'm just looking at this here, and I'm thinking, what would be the use case for doing that versus not, and would that be
the alternative is that sorting salvage becomes a really good moneymaker.
Yeah.
It like, just like alking, right? It's a very predictable, constant moneymaker. You invest time, you get money. You buy the salvage of the GE, process it, you sell the loot on the GE. Very straightforward. Yeah, could be.
I don't know. It's an interesting thought. I could go either way, honestly, after our discussion here.
Don't know what the right answer is.
No, I don't.
Maybe they should pull it.
No. Another change that I'm eagerly looking forward to is that I'm on both playtests I did previously, the alpha at RuneFest and then the alpha when we got it. I lost my captain's log both times. For full release, the captain's log will be viewable within a side panel interface.
How do you lose your captain's log? My goodness.
I put it in a chest on a different boat.
Oh my gosh.
And then that boat was at a different
port. What a first world problem. Oh no, I have more than one boat.
No, but I think that's pretty much everything here for this alpha so far, or beta so far. Runs until July 3rd, so there's still some time if you're listening to this and want to get your fingers on it.
I do want to say I saw almost no feedback being shared on Reddit compared to the alpha. I saw relatively few players playing in the beta worlds compared to last time.
They tweeted that 23,000 people so far have tried this.
Okay. Maybe it's because I didn't play on release, and maybe there's more, and maybe there's a bunch of people that filled in the feedback form. I'm going to say this regardless. Don't just think that, oh, I saw the alpha, it looked good, I'm going to leave this be for the rest of the time. Like, this needs your feedback. Maybe you completely disagree with our takes here. Let your voice be heard.
Or maybe you still want nothing to do with the skill. Go try it and see and give feedback.
Exactly. I see a bunch, it's probably not just me, but I see a good chunk of the feedback that I had from last time and being addressed in this beta right now. That's why I'm so excited about the random events. That's why I'm so excited for the changes planned for the full release. They are listening. They're getting that right. I think we need a good amount of feedback on the combat and crew system to hopefully get that in a good state.
And as far as we know, we could be the lone ones out here and not feeling like it's working for us. So let them know what you think. Let us know what you think, because that's where the fun happens.
Yes,
because you know what they say. Hey, it's like when you open up a. Never mind. I won't go there.
So, Maxscape. I don't think this is very controversial.
No.
People who have the Maxscape are going to lose it on release. I am of mixed opinion on this. The downside of people losing the Maxscape on release is that the people who had the Maxscape previously will have a strong incentive of rushing through the skill as fast as possible. This is why I'm generally a fan of like a leniency period, just so that people don't feel forced to completely crunch through the entire skill and not enjoy it on the way. But that would be a very unique and new thing for old school.
It really would. And the reason, and even all things RuneScape, because whenever a new skill comes out in RS3, everybody loses their Maxscape and the max skill. So they don't do grace periods for that. And I think, having that discussion about, should there be some sort of grace period for this is interesting. But it's already, I think, pretty much been decided that you will lose the Maxscape when this comes out, based on what's
and I think that is completely fine. I hope it is not going to make people try and get through it as fast as possible. I hope everybody still enjoys the journey.
Yeah. And
especially for a skill like sailing, that is all about the journey.
That's good. That's good. If you have a Maxscape and you've added, things to it, they say for the combined Maxscape variants, they want to propose the ability to dismantle or remove the combat aspects from it, which I think is a fair compromise.
I've always been surprised that this is not possible to begin with. Like, what's the point of making this like a non-reversible decision? You've done your work to earn an Inferno Cape. You've done your work to earn a Maxscape. Combine them, split them. I don't care.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. But We shall see what happens when sailing arrives. All right. The summer sweep up changes are also here this week, and not too much controversial here. We went through most of these on launch. Tombs of Amascut changes in terms of boss and loot. Just stop me if there's anything you want to touch on as we run through this list here.
They broke the skulls at TOA. Yeah, so for those who don't know, in the final fight with the Warden, at some hit point thresholds, the Warden sort of spawns a bunch of skulls, and you need to kill all of them within a certain time to not get hit. Pretty hard. The problem, the nice thing is that if you click them, your attack delay is immediately reset, right? So if you're using, I think you have to use melee on these. So if you use like the Fang, you can like click, and it will all just work. That was broken, meaning you had to wait for a full attack cycle between all of the skulls. Given that we're talking about like half a dozen to like 8 skulls, that's a lot of extra ticks all of a sudden.
Yeah, and I can imagine what can happen in those ticks. So, but I'm going to assume this has been hotfixed since then.
Yeah, it's been hotfixed.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Project Rebalance stuff, more on the weaknesses and the NPC defense changes. I think this is the most impactful thing for the mid-range level, because we talked at length last year about Project Rebalance and the elemental weakness and just what it did for the standard spell book, and then you factor that in when you look at things like flat armor and whatnot now, and wow.
I think there was a good discussion that I saw at some point that the new Monster Inspect?
Yeah, that's what it's called.
Is at level 42, which seems a bit silly because we want to probably make it a little bit more accessible. It's also not accessible to free-to-play players right now. So, like, one of the proposals I saw was to replace like the cost, because currently I think it's like Cosping and Mind Runes. So replace it with Body and Mind Runes and put it at like level 12 or level 13. Basically, you unlock all of the elemental spells, and the next level you unlock the thing that tells you what elemental spell to use. I think that makes a little bit more sense. Where they put it right now, like at level 42, why, right? Like, especially if you think about.
Well, it's level 42 because 42 is the answer to everything. That's why.
Yeah, but by level 42, people have found the wiki.
Yeah, I know. I was just pointing out the connection there, but yeah.
So I think there's a fair point that it should probably be a little bit earlier. Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me to put this behind a particular magic level, especially because it can help so much in the early game.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. And they do have the handy dandy spreadsheet still if you want to go through all of the elemental changes that were brought in for that one. The loot table changes are in, as we talked about, and one thing that you told me you were working on this week was the was some of the giants. You were trying to get your first key.
Trying to get my first key. Yeah, you still need one key to access the lair for the first time, based on how I understand it, at least. So I've been massacring moss giants to no avail. I mean, to be honest, I got pretty lucky with all of the other drops. I got a bunch of Ranar seeds, which are worth like 25k each, and I got a bunch of ancient shards, and I got a totem piece, and all good, but still no moss giant key.
And what's their rate? It's like 1 in
150, or 1 in 75 on a Slayer task.
Okay, so you could have a few more to go then, based on where you're at then.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
What about Duke Sicelius here?
Duke Sicelius, good changes. I am not planning on going back anytime soon, though it is one of the easier Desert Treasure 2 bosses, and I think it's a pretty decent moneymaker. It wasn't my favorite one mechanics-wise, though.
Okay, fair enough. And then just other little bits and bob changes. The Dragon Hunter wand now is 40% magic damage and 75% accuracy bonus against dragons, and can now autocast the ancient magics. And that's one thing that I wanted to pull out, is that I when I was looking at the tables, I last leagues I was thinking, oh, or is there nothing else that can cast additional ancient magic? So it's nice to see something else added to that list there. The Huey codal changes are also in this batch as well, by lowering the tail HP, increasing the number of hide drops, and adjusting the crafting level requirements lowered by 10.
Yep.
Those are the ones that stood out for me. Plus Deranged Archaeologist. Have you ever fought him and killed him?
Yeah, I got all my Deranged Archaeology CAs.
Okay, good. I remember spending a good amount of time there on leagues, rinsing and repeating there, because that's the non-metal dragon way of getting the Runite crossbow for the irons.
Yep.
But anything?
I just did clues for my rune crossbow.
Yeah, that was probably the easier way in hindsight. But you know how I feel about clues. So.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else on the other grab bag list here?
Nope. Can't wait for the next batch of summer sweep up, the Slayer one.
Yeah, that's good. That's good that they do these, and good that they're able to roll them in so quick. But I
think one of the things that I did see is that, so there's like an Enrage phase on Akka in TOA, and they basically overcorrected a little bit and trivialized that now from what I could see and hear from people. So they will probably make that a little bit harder again.
Yeah. But I think I think that's pretty much it for this episode. I don't have anything else. Do you?
Nope.
No.
I think it's
okay.
time to get back to the grind.
All right, sounds good. Well, of course, if you want this episode delivered to you when it arrives every other week, just head on over to update.show/OS. We're on all the major podcast listening services: Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Spotify, and of course YouTube as well. YouTube.com/OSRS update. Do remember to go check out the beta if you have the time, and then after that, take the survey. It's open for everybody for a reason, and just give some nice kind of feedback on that. But with that being said, we'll see you guys in 2 weeks' time for another episode of the Old School RuneScape Update. See you then, everyone. Take care.
Bye.